Hi everyone. Today we'll be doing a short uh, workshop, I guess, or lecture on how to prepare for debates as a judge. So, how to improve, how to get better, but also how to get yourself into shape for a tournament. We have a lot of these lectures for how to do it as a debater, not as many to do it as a judge, when in fact the level of preparation and the type of changes you would need to make to your lifestyle are actually quite different, especially given how much investment both require to really succeed at the level you want for a tournament, especially a major. So some caveats. So the first is that improving as a judge and training for tournaments as a judge is not straightforward. It's not as well supported. Um, for debaters, there's a clear, measurable um, bar, right? Which is you can see your speaks after the tournament, and you can see if you break high. But if you're a judge breaking deep, or judging deep out rounds, isn't necessarily a reflection of your skill or not. It could be a reflection of conflicts in the tournament or just different ad score priorities, and you won't always get to see your score after the tournament. And overall, this isn't it's not as well supported by debate institutions. Um, most of them will have some curriculum for debaters to improve. Not all of them will have curriculums for judges to improve. So this is acknowledging that the judge journey tends to be less supported. It tends to be a bit lonelier, and for a lot of judges, they only really judge after their debate career has really finished. This will not cover the some of the unsavory components of advancing your judge career. I know that some people believe that you have to schmooze or to suck up to people or to make friends to do well as a judge. I don't really think that's the case, but some people do. I will not be covering that here. Also, it would be a bit weird to have a lecture on how to do social corruption. This is also finally from my perspective. So I judged rarely until Worlds 2023. I mostly judged in high school tournaments, and or when I would need the IA for something, and then afterwards I judged more often after that. Not after I finished, and I settled down and stopped debating as much. So the first thing is just, first thing to cover is just the necessary bits. So when you're preparing for a tournament as a judge or preparing for a debate as a judge, you have to get all of this done so that you can focus on judging and judging your very, very best. So first is you should remember to take the judge test, especially for majors, which have these. So when you do this, you want to review the manual, review the handbook, and refer to it as the main document. Um, most of the questions will be about like interpretations of the manual or just checks to if you have read the manual or not. So just read it. Like the best way to really take the test is to have um to be confident and to be conversant in what the manual says, because that will basically guide whether or not you are if whether or not you are doing the you're doing the answering correctly. And if there is a demo debate, make sure to watch it fully to form a proper opinion on it. Try not to let speakers or the cloud, or the what you know about the speakers or what you know about the round to cloud your judgment. It may be a deliberate effort by the ad core to choose a round that was a loss, but actually they believed another team won, or they might put speakers in that are known to be good and then deliberately instruct them to do a bad speech. So just judge the debate on the merits of the debate only, and watch it fully to make a judgment. Also, please remember to make your written OAs concise, because if you just write it for too long, and you make it too in depth, then it won't really be it will give off the impression that you're not being concise or that you have to spend too much time explaining your OA. Just get to the important bits. That's what really matters anyway. The second bit of advice is to get good rest before the debate. You don't want to fall asleep in the middle of a round. You want to be able to explain your OA to the teams with maximum clarity, with a lucid perspective. And also, like, let's be honest, teams can tell if a judge is falling asleep in the middle of a round. And there are some actual debates that have happened where judges have fallen asleep. Uh, that cause an equity issue. So just don't fall asleep. Get good rest, be kind to yourself, and don't force yourself to drink too many coffees. Just get a full 8 hours before the tournament if you can. Finally is, of course, please prepare and prepare. uh in the sense that you want to have your notes ready, and the pen ready. You want to make sure that, like, your phone, your timer is on full battery. You remember to clap. You remember the script to say beforehand, where you say, call this house to order, debating on the motion, blah 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 blah. Like, the last thing you want is something to get off your groove, to mess with your tracking, or to make you feel unconfident in an OA. Um, and also it's important to psych yourself up as well, like because you are the person that has listened the most to this round. Like you are a subject matter expert on the round because you are likely the only person that has exerted effort to listen to the round in full. Like honestly, some debaters will have not listened as much after the speech is done, and so in this room, you are the most expert person on this round. Presuming you're the only judge there. So prepare as much as possible, and give yourself the confidence it takes to give a good OA, but also give yourself the tools you need to succeed, like having all your notes ready. If it's a laptop, have it charged. If it's a phone you need to time, have that charged. Have a timer app ready. Remember to clap, etc., etc., etc. All the necessary bits. Remember also that as a judge, you are not just judging the round, but you're also moderating the room. So an important component to your role as a judge is to make sure that all the debaters are having a good time by, responsibly calling order to disruptions or interruptions in the round, like if the audience is being noisy, or if, for example, a debater is barracking, then you have an obligation to order and wave them down. Okay. So that's the necessary bits to get into shape before a tournament. Now, the more onerous question I thought of here was, how do you get better as a judge? Because we have sort of an imprecise sense of when a judge is good or bad. A lot of this is to taste, um, which is quite different from how we view debaters, right? Because while some people will have diverging opinions on if a debater is good or if a debater is bad, typically the divergence is not so large, right? Like you'll have a debater that's very, very good, and maybe some people will think he's not great, he's just pretty good. But it's clear that he knows this person knows how to debate, right? Um, but for judges, the opinions will vary quite heavily. Like some people will think this person's a very good judge, and other people will think they only give rep calls, they're a very bad judge. So it's not really straightforward to improve as a judge, as I said before. So I'm gonna give some two slides of information on how to train, how to improve as a judge, just to try and get better, and in ways that are clear and true for just about every judge. So there are some ways that work for some people and some ways that work for others, like practicing giving an OA with no notes, which is a bit of an interesting exercise, but will not really work for everyone. So the first thing to do is to break down how to improve as a judge into two steps. So this is for Australs. So I won't be covering deliberations and panel management, but to improve as a judge outside of deliberations and panel management, there are two main components. The first is coming to a decision, and the second is explaining your decision to the teams. So these are the two components, right? Like you listen to the round, you form an opinion for 10 or 5 minutes, and then afterwards you explain your oral adjudication to the other teams. You give the oral adjudication. So first is, how do you come to a decision and how do you improve coming to a decision? So the first is sorry. So the first is, you want to um have two things. The first is you want to have correct and proper recall of the round. And second is, upon looking at the round, you make the correct judgment in issues to come to the correct judgment about the round. So those are the two subcomponents of coming to a good decision. I realize now the header is wrong. There should be coming to a decision. So first is, you want, when you track, practice note taking. So you want to find a way of note taking that works for you. For me, what I found that works for me is I like to have Google Docs, not Microsoft Word and not paper, because I type much faster than I write. And I like the way that Google Docs sort of implicitly encodes information in a hierarchy, where you can have bullet points that are indented inside a table, a two-column table with four rows. So one for each speech. And I like that type of way because that helps me type really quickly and encode information about, like, if this is a sub argument or this is a sub reason for something, or if it's a title, without having to think too much about it. So find a way of note taking that works for you and improve over time with it. Like, try as much as possible to be able to track without writing things down verbatim, so that you are less stressed about writing things down and you can actually listen to the speech. Pay attention to your memory recall. In feedback from teams, do you find that teams give feedback about cases that were missed, or that you didn't track a chain of responses as well as you could have? Try and figure out which ways of note taking, which ways of tracking are best. One simple way of doing this would be to organize bars, or organize the sort of practice rounds, and you show the teams your notes and check whether or not you missed any important arguments from the teams. So pay attention to your memory recall. Remember, for debaters, they're training their ability to give speeches to the judge, which means they ask feedback from the judge listening to them. So it's no shame. There's no bad. There's nothing bad in checking if you actually did crack correctly after the round. And you check with the teams either during during a spar round or after a tournament round even, and you ask like did you have any feedback or was my tracking okay, etc., etc. That's the first bit to coming to a decision. The second bit to coming to a decision is to judge between issues correctly. So the main bit of advice I have here is to become maximally conversant with debating ideas. The reason why is because you want to compare ideas in a smart sense. Like you want to compare the way in which they interact, which requires some background knowledge about the real world. Because Gov can give a reason for why something is true. Op can give a reason for why something is true. And the smart judge, the better judges, what they're able to do is to compare the reasons themselves rather than just ask themselves the question of if if it's a deadlock or not. Um, an example of this might be an economic debate where government bench says, actually, prices are going to go up because the supply of X good is going to go down. And then opposition is going to say, actually, prices go down because um, the demand for this is also going down. And so, as a judge, you would have to evaluate if you're more persuaded by the reason for the government side or the opposition side, which means you're actually comparing the reasons that they provided. And then you might say to yourself, oh, I'm convinced that the supply reason is more effective because it deals with a larger set of costs or a larger set of customers. Whereas the demand is quite a specific claim. It only affects a very small group of customers that don't spend all that much. So, judging between these two ideas or these two issues, I'm more persuaded by the first. So, the best way to get experience on this type of thing, other than just learning about the world, knowing more about the world, to get good judgments between these types of things, is just to watch debates often and maybe even debate in some of these debate rounds, just to have a better idea of why a team might feel aggrieved that their reason wasn't compared or wasn't given much weight. This isn't just for the likelihood of reasons, but also for the importance of reasons. There are some comparisons that are obvious to make, like people die versus people lose some money. And so clearly people dying is more important. But you would also want to get a sense for what issues teams feel will be important to them and the issues that you don't feel to be important. Typically, the discrepancy is where it's most important for judges to pay attention. Because if you and a team agree that an issue is important, then obviously you're going to say it in your OA. But you need to be looking out for issues that you feel are unimportant, that teams feel are important, so that you are able to cite them in the round and explain to teams why they are unimportant, rather than make the team feel unheard and miss a significant portion of the debate. Also, it's important to gut check if your sense for a debate is actually correct. That is, if there is an issue you feel is unimportant, but teams feel is important, you should check yourself if you are correctly evaluating the importance of that issue to the debate. So, to sum up this bit, first is you want to improve your tracking, focus on practicing your tracking, and try and think of how it maps to your memory recall as a tangible, fixable skill that you can improve on. The second is improve your judgment, which is that, in some ways you could say improving your debate sense. And the best way to really do this is to become familiar, comfortable with debates, and to look specifically at how reasons interact in the constellation or the universe that the debate has created. And then rather than sort of compare reason one versus reason two, you get a more holistic appreciation of the debate by having a good sense of judging between issues by looking at the issues themselves. Okay. The second bit is coming to a decision. Sorry, is explaining your decision. So again, here the header is wrong. So there are two bits here. First is the internal preparation time, and the next bit is explaining it actually. So the first is after you're done, deliberating and making a decision, you have to organize that decision. So one bit is that judges tend to organize their thoughts into issues, but a lot of them will organize it into very generic issues that don't really make sense, like depth of analysis, um, you know, robustness of response, team consistency. Like these are technical issues, and sometimes technical issues are the right way to go about it. But typically, that will place a large burden on the judge because then they will have to repeat issues. They will have to repeat arguments between issues, and bring them up again and again. So typically, it actually makes more sense, at least my opinion is, to organize it by issues, as in arguments in the round or points of contention in the round. You want these issues to be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. That is, you don't want the issues to overlap too much to save you time in an OA, because remember, you're working with limited time. It's like you're giving a debate speech, basically. But you also want to be collectively exhaustive. So, again, another way of practicing this and to train is to just listen to debates, watch debates, get a feel for what debaters think to be important issues, and ask them their opinions, and practice organizing your thoughts into issues yourself. But also try and keep a running tally for these issues and where they plunk in as the debate is ongoing. That will make it much easier rather than having to organize it from the very beginning. And practicing this skill during debates, keeping sort of a multitasking running flow, is actually quite useful and a good skill to practice. So maybe during debates, what you can do is you can have like, oh, there's one issue so far, and it's, are people richer or not? And then you plunk in ideas from the gov and from the op into it as teams are speaking. And then if a new issue is introduced, then you make a second bucket and then you start putting ideas there. So you want to organize your thoughts into issues so that it's easy for you to argue your point to the team. Remember, you can think of your OA as a debate speech, and your arguments are just your issues explaining why one team won or lost an issue. The other bit here is you want to be clear and specific. So you want to practice specifically citing the arguments that teams gave. And this is specifically because you want to make teams feel heard and to not be overly harsh. Rather than casting aspersions on the team, saying, oh, they didn't respond, they were bad, you can give specific arguments they didn't respond to and cite their attempts to respond and explain why these attempts were insufficient. This is all reliant on having good tracking, which is why we emphasized it before. But one really important way of improving and training as a judge is to practice being clear and specific in your oral adjudication. In other words, practice giving your oral adjudication in such a way that if you were a judge listening to a debater, right, that and this debater gave this argument about the debate, you would be able to confidently believe them. So be clear and be specific in the sense that you're being clear that this issue is in this sub point is in this issue, and this issue is important to winning the debate because of reasons 1, 2, 3. So you don't just want to justify, of course, that teams won an issue, but also to justify why an issue is important. So this type of thing is important to improve. And the way you could really get better at this, honestly, is just to practice taking out every part of the speech that's vague and replace it with the specific instance it's referring to. So, for example, you can say, well, teams could have done better in arguing or explaining the impacts of the argument. Rather than saying that, you could say, the impact, number one, this impact was given. It was not well explained enough to be credited. And so, just because we can believe that the impact is true doesn't mean we believe it's important. It did not mean the threshold of proof to be believed as important, because this is what they just said for why it's important, or for this is what they just said to explain the issue. So it was basically a one off. So that type of thing, being clear and being specific, is very important to improve upon, because you want to give teams the not just the impression that they understand, but being clear is sort of proof of concept that you did understand. Like, it's also justifying to yourself that when you're able to, when you're pressed for an explanation for why a certain part of the case was valued in this way, you can say it was valued in this way because they gave this specific logic for this. This specific logic is a strong piece of logic, and I can re-articulate it because I actually understood it. So it's proof of concept to the teams, but also it's important to gut check. It's important in gut checking whether or not you actually did come to the right decision, because it shows that you did actively consider all materially relevant factors to the decision. Like if they said this point or if they said that point, well, yes, they said this point, but you cannot just explain. You don't just cite the specific point that they gave, but you are clear about its position or its relevance within the broader case. Okay, so that's basically how you improve and prepare for tournaments as a judge. So other than the necessary bits I mentioned, when you're improving as a judge, it's important to think of it as practicing two different tasks. Coming to a decision properly, well, so practicing tracking and practicing judgments between issues. And doing that in spars, watching debates, getting a feel for tournaments, and also actually explaining your decision to teams. And there you practice your prep time, so to speak, prep time by organizing your thoughts into issues, by thinking of your issues as arguments to be launched, and then, of course, by explaining it to teams in a clear and lucid way, being specific about the actual issues, the actual arguments, the actual subpoints, rebuttals that you're talking about. All of this is helpful in becoming a better judge, and hopefully, having a better appreciation of the debates you're watching yourself. Um, that's all. Thanks for listening.